In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning, everybody. I can see Christos is first off the blocks today. Good morning. God bless you. Your prayers for me and Gary also. Hello, Gary. I wonder how you're getting on with your proposed trip to Mount Athos. Helia, good morning from wet Wales. Yeah, it's a bit gooey here as well, to tell you the truth. And good morning to Ahmed. Nice for seeing you yesterday. It was a very productive evening we had. Miss Connie, God bless you and keep you. And Joan, good morning. I haven't seen you for a little while. I guess you've been busy making your cakes and things. Anton, happy Wednesday, everybody. Yep, and happy St. Valentine's Day as well. If only people really knew the better stories about St. Valentine, I think they'd find the whole day more joyful. But in fact, I've been looking in our Orthodox calendars for St. Valentine for today, and without success. So I guess we don't celebrate him today. Suzanne, good morning, and keep you. Bev and Frank, good morning also. It's my pleasure, Frank, and it's also my privilege to be able to share with everybody. There we go. Right. So today, we're going to be looking at Acts chapter 8, verses 1, verses 2, and verses 3. So not a great deal in terms of reading to do today, but actually a lot in a very small space. I just had a quick drink of tea. This is that mug that Stella gave us, which has got lots of people's names in it who watch this, and also the other side, the 10 at 10 thing as well, which is rather wonderful on YouTube, which is quite exciting. Probably ought to have a whole lot of them done and sell them and see if we make any money. But I don't know quite how to say, or how much they'd sell for. It's probably quite expensive. Anyway, here we go. Now Saul was consenting to his death, that was to St. Stephen's murder. At that time a great persecution arose against the church, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial, and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. It's one of the great dramatic moments in history, isn't it? We see, later on we'll see, this amazing volte-face of Saul as he becomes St. Paul, as he meets with the Lord. And part of all of this that Luke is telling us now is to show the way that God can make use of even the most unlikely circumstances. What appears to us to be complete disaster, death, destruction, all the rest of it, actually turns out to be for the church's good. You might ask, well, doesn't God care about our suffering? Well, of course he does, but God enters into our suffering, he doesn't take it away. And by entering into it, he transforms it into something greater. Now, that's not much fun if you're the one being burnt alive or crucified, or having your house burnt down, or being covered in feathers and tar. But later, depending on your own ability to endure, there is a great reward for this. Not much fun, but then Christianity is not much fun. That is not the idea of it. It's full of love, it's full of joy, it is full of heavenly bliss, of being united to Christ in a particular way. But I don't think that Jesus came so we could have fun and have a, what's it people used to say? Nice service today, Father. Nice service today, Vicar. Christianity is much more than just a whole series of nice services. A friend of mine who is a priest who's now died used to say, if anybody says that anything in the church is nice, that is the kiss of death. You know very well that you need to up your game. There we go. What was I saying? Anyway, verse 1. Now Saul was consenting to his death. At that time, a great persecution arose against the church. We'll read that a bit later on. So, Saul consenting to his death, it says here. Now, synevdochon in the Greek, it means he was gratified by it. He fully agreed with it. That is, he really enters into the whole business of killing Stephen, and he's delighted by what he sees. That's really what this means. And this is the first part of Luke showing, and going to carry on showing all the way through this particular book, how evil actions get turned round for good, and that evil is used by God for his own purpose. There's a little quote down here in the study Bible. In the liturgy of St. Basil, we proclaim God as one who makes the evil to be good. In other words, God uses the sins of man for good and holy results. That's a really important thing. I've read St. Basil's liturgy so many times, but that's one of those little bits that somehow or other just passed by me. I read but didn't actually see and internalize, but now of course I will be. Okay. And then it says consenting to his death. The Greek word again there really means his murder, his slaughter. And it's not, it is something that Paul is actively engaged in. He wanted the death, and he's glad when the death happens, and now he enters into that death and consents to it, makes it, as it were, something that he partakes of fully and are gratified by. Part 2 of verse 8, of verse 1, chapter 8. At that time a great persecution arose against the church, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. So at that time, it means from then onwards, from that time forwards, first of all, there was a persecution. And the persecution is against the church in Jerusalem. So it's relatively localized at first, just within the capital city. Outside Jerusalem, the news has not really reached them particularly so far. And then what happens? Everybody gets scattered, it says, except for the apostles. Now, it looks here as if Luke, who's a foreigner, he's not from Jerusalem, he's not Jewish, might be looking at this from his own point of view. I went to the room, nobody was there. Only the servants were there, only the cooks were there, only the people drawing out the room, but nobody was there, not a soul. My mother used to say, oh, it's been such a lonely week, I've been here all by myself all week. And say, well, didn't so-and-so turn up? Oh yes, so-and-so turned up. What about the hairdresser? The hairdresser came. What about Bill, who's the maintenance man? Yes, he came, of course. And Don, the gardener, did he come? Yes, of course, Don was there. And the person who came to do her nails and the, X, Y, and Z, they were all there. Not a soul. Nobody, hadn't seen anybody all week. What she meant was she hadn't seen any of the family. And Luke is doing something similar here. All were scattered throughout the region of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. Well, there are quite a number of them. And what it rather looks like from what happens next is that really what is happening is that it's against the Hellenistic Christians that the persecution took place first. Maybe because the others were able to just go into the background. You know how it would be? If you're going to persecute people in Birmingham, and there's a particular group, and some of them don't speak with a Birmingham accent, then you just go and ask everybody questions. And when they talk to you in any accent from anywhere else in the country, you say, "You're not a Brummie, come with me." And the same was true here. So they were looking for people who were Christian, but it's easier to spot the ones who were not actually from Jerusalem. Presumably, the ones from Jerusalem were A, less easy to spot, and B, most people from Jerusalem, it was in their vested interest to remain attached to the temple. Okay? So, and then E, they're shown to be part, this is shown to be part of Christ's will, that they are scattered to, and he even uses the same sort of way, Judea and Samaria. Jesus himself said at the beginning of Acts chapter 1, verse 8, right at the start, he said, "You're going to go out, starting in Jerusalem, then in Judea and Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth," which is where I am now. So this is shown to be part of Christ's will. He's making use of this evil thing in order to do that. Okay? Then scattered. They were all scattered except the apostles. That word there, scattered, has been used by quite a number of the church fathers. They like it because you can hang a good sermon on a word like that, can't you? It's sort of clickbait for the sermon. Everybody pricks up their ears and, ooh, what's he saying? And the one I like most of all is St. Bede. I like St. Bede anyway, as you probably gather. So St. Bede says, "They are scattered like seeds." The idea of the Lord going out like a sower, throwing the seeds out. It was with Paul's consent, says St. Bede, it was with St. Paul's consent that the occurrence of the tribulation became the seedbed of the church. So he wrote that in the 8th century, around about 730, something like that. So he's got this idea of being scattered like seeds, and then having done that, St. Paul having scattered them, this scattering means that they fall like seeds in the ground, and the church then grows up wherever they happen to be. Okay, so that's quite exciting, really. I like that idea. Meanwhile, the apostles stay where they are. Now, earlier on, in earlier parts of Acts of the Apostles, Luke is trying to show the way that Christianity is a natural growth from Judaism. He does this also all the way through his own gospel as well. Christianity is a natural growth from Judaism. If you were Jewish, you should expect Christianity. That's what he's basically saying. And he makes it clear the apostles stay in Jerusalem because this is also part and parcel of his design, to show you that this powerhouse of Jerusalem, the holy city, near to the temple, near to the crucifixion, near to the resurrection, near to the ascension into heaven of the Lord, is where it all comes from, down here. This is the powerhouse. This is the battery from which the wires will go in every direction throughout the world in order to spread this gospel. Okay, so that's Luke's sort of theme, as it were, the way that he thinks of the gospel spreading throughout the world. So it's important that the apostles, the ones sent there, have their base camp still in Jerusalem. We know that they also disappeared all over the place too, leaving James there behind, and later somebody else, and Peter coming and going and so on. Peter eventually going off to Antioch and then to Rome, then being crucified. Thomas going off himself all the way to India and being speared by a spear, and so it goes on. So you have these, but the basic idea is here in Jerusalem, this is where the powerhouse is, this is where authority resides, because that's where God has chosen to be. Now, within that idea as well, you've got St. Paul coming back to Jerusalem later on to check up on his own teaching. Later on, we'll see some interesting things where St. Paul's writing and Luke's writing disagree with each other. That doesn't matter. But the interesting thing is that St. Paul, after quite a long time preaching, returns back to Jerusalem in order to have his preaching validated. Okay? Verse 2. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't say Christians did that. You notice that? It didn't say the church made great lamentation either. And the church fathers have produced a great deal of dandruff by scratching their heads, thinking about this particular thing. Now, one of the questions is, who are these devout men and who dare to come and collect the body? St. Augustine has some things to say about this. One of them is, I can't remember now where St. Augustine gets it from. It might be from Josephus. It says, Stephen, having been stoned outside the north gate of Jerusalem, lay there without burial for a day and a night by order of the Jewish authorities, in order that his body might be eaten by birds and beasts, but God did not allow them to touch it. So that's an interesting little bit of information, quite probably legendary. But it also explains why it is that there's this gap between the death of Stephen and the mention of him being buried. Do you think? You would expect something like, and when he had said this, he fell asleep, from the previous one, and devout men carried Stephen to his burial, made great lamentation over him. That's how you would expect it to happen. But it's almost as if Luke has put this in as a secondary thought. Okay, this persecution happened. Oh, by the way, what happened to Stephen is this. It doesn't say who did it, just devout men. And the idea that the Jewish authorities would leave him to be eaten by birds and beasts is quite likely. It was quite common for criminals to be left where they lay without burying them. They had been placed outside, as it were, the Jewish faith, and therefore what happened to their bodies was no concern to them. The Romans also would make pits of the dead, or they had executed, in order to terrify people, and the smell of death, horrific, would then obviously terrify people as well. Okay? By legend also, there's a nice legend, an interesting legend, and one that actually sounds right. By legend, Gamaliel, you remember Gamaliel? He was that good egg that we heard telling them not to fight against this teaching, so they might find themselves fighting with God. Gamaliel, feeling compassion for the Christians, collected the body with some Christians and took it by his own cart to his own estate and buried him in his own tomb, and then mourned for 40 days. Okay? And that's really interesting, and quite a possibility. Okay? Now, it makes sense, actually, if that's what happened. You might say, why does that make sense? Well, one of the things is that, first of all, nobody would have harmed Gamaliel. He was far too important a teacher within Jerusalem for anybody to arrest him. Least of all St. Paul, who was his student. Secondly, B, we know that Gamaliel is a decent man, and had he seen the body of Stephen, who he knew to be a good man, and probably heard and probably thinking, what he said was largely true about us. And of course he was a Pharisee as well, Gamaliel, so he wasn't all that enamored by the temple either. He's known to be a decent man. And then C, Christians don't lament a martyr. do we? We might feel sadness because of the way the person has been dragged from us. We don't do 40 days lamentation for somebody who's a martyr. We might do 40 days of rejoicing and special prayer and asking that martyr for his or her prayers, but we don't do it as lamentation. And that would have happened right away from the very beginning. So devout men could well be Gamaliel and his disciples. They pick up Stephen, they know it's been a murder, they know it's not right, and they take him off to Gamaliel's own burial place. And as a little aside here, that would make sense too, because Stephen would also be then copying the Lord and being buried in a tomb that's not his, but that of a wealthy man. So I've lost my track here. Somewhere or other I got lost. Anyway, St. Augustine actually adds to this. He says, we don't pray for martyrs as they assist us by their prayers. So we don't make lamentation for them. We, of course, we remember them in the Proscomiti, particularly the first part of the Proscomiti, where martyrs and others and saints and so on are part of the 9 ranks of angels and saints that we remember. We don't normally remember, people don't normally ask for petitions to be made on behalf of, for the health of body and soul, of somebody who's a saint. So somebody might ask me, put, I don't know, a saint's name down in the Proscomiti, and I'll take a fragment and I'll put it with the ranks of angels and saints elsewhere, asking them for their prayers, not helping them by ours. Verse the 3rd, as for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. Right, so that word havoc, interesting, isn't it? Saulos, they, elimat ineto tin ecclesian. My apologies to Christos for my terrible Greek. But that word there, that is translated here, made havoc, is translated into English in a whole variety of different ways. Destroying, outraging, maltreating, defiling, soiling, insulting. It's a really ghastly word. You want to use a bad word for what St. Paul was doing, and there you have it. It's a really good bad word, as it were. He's doing everything he can think of in order to do harm, out of zeal for God, of course. So it's a terrible thing. What's he doing? He's entering into houses, and the word there is dragging off. It's a violent, frenzied thing that he's doing. St. John Chrysostom writes pages about these words, in fact. Dragging them off, entering houses. St. John Chrysostom wanting us to understand the zealousness with which St. Paul is acting in an evil way. And actually it's zealousness that the Lord can then use. As I said before, people who are painted bright white or darkest black, fine. But grey people, well, what can the Lord do with them? Paint the inside of your house red, paint it, I don't know, pink, paint it bright blue. But magnolia, somehow or other, it's sort of a nothing colour. And there are people, lots of people in this world, whose lives are entirely magnolia. We said this, I think, last week. Magnolia grandiflora is a very beautiful and spectacular thing, so I don't want to insult that beautiful, or Magnolia stellata, one of my favourites, much smaller magnolia. Really beautiful little plant. But what is to be a magnolia person, where you sort of fit in, it's strange really, magnolia. If you're thinking about a flower bed, there are plants that you sort of pack the place with, don't you, in order to just sort of fill out the space. Something like, I don't know, creeping Jenny or something. It's a sort of nothing little plant. It just sort of stops weeds growing. But a rose or a beautiful hosta or something like that grabs your eyes. And lots of people are just little creeping jennies. And the Lord can't make much of them. But a really prickly person, a great big prickly rose, God can start doing something with that. He can pluck you and make you part of his flower arrangement. Hosta, the fantastic leaves, he can do something with you as well. So we need to not so much be worried about the sins that we have, but the main sin, I always think, is really not being alive. Just existing and not breathing in God's wonderful and beautiful creation, not looking at it intently and seeing it for what it is, this fantastic statement of the glory of God. And alongside that goes a passion. There are people who do terrible things, terrible. But in some sense, at least they are alive. And if you do terrible things, you can repent greatly. I'm going to be misquoted here, I can tell. You can repent greatly and really turn back to Christ. Whereas if you're a little creeping jelly, a little magnolia paint, then your life is, you haven't really entered into life at all. What on earth was I saying? Oh yeah. So St. Paul is a violent, frenzied person, dragging people off and doing what? It says here, committing them to prison. And that word commit there again is that famous word, paradidomi, which St. Luke has used all the way through in a sacrificial sense. Okay? A really sacrificial sense. So the Lord is going to be paradidomied, handed over to the chief priests for sacrifice by Judas, who is the person who's doing the paradidoming, the betraying, the handing over. It's like you take a sheep, you paradidomi it to the priest, hand it over to the priest for the priest to sacrifice. And now these Christians are being handed over, betrayed, it's used in English translations of Luke, betrayed into prison by Paul, but really handed over, and that sacrificial language, I think, is not unimportant. Okay, so there we have it. We can leave Saul committing outrages, and while that is happening, we can pray for the successors of those people who've been terrorized by him, and that means us, those of us who need our prayers. Right, let us see what people are saying. Joan is saying, not very busy, but my phone doesn't notify me when you're up, so I have to remember. Bless you. Well, I always think of you decorating those beautiful cakes and making lovely things like donuts and other stuff like that, and maybe you're working at overtime at the moment making, oh no, that would be yesterday, making pancakes for everybody. Matthew and I realized that both of us really enjoyed pancakes yesterday, and we haven't made any. So we can make lots of pancakes in the future, some savory ones, some sweet ones, and so on. Some American style pancakes, they're nice. Some Scots pancakes. My mouth is watering now, even thinking about them. God bless you also out there. Penelope, good morning. Sorry I'm late. Well, God bless you. Anton says, I can't find the day when Orthodox celebrates St. Valentine. Wiki says, the 6th or the 30th of July. There we are. We can all send our loved ones Valentine's cards twice in July, on the 6th and the 30th, and really muddle them up. Those Orthodox, they're weird. Karl Ahmed, the subdeacon, says, Father, Paul's return to Jerusalem to have his ministry validated, doesn't that suggest there could have been a valid apostolic ministries that are nevertheless not formally linked to the apostles? I think specifically of other Christian communities. Well, I don't know is the answer to that question. It's a very interesting question. Basically, the apostles themselves are not ordained in the same way. They're the ones that ordain. Okay? They ordain. So Paul doesn't need to be ordained. He's been appointed by Christ. Just the way also the other apostles have been appointed by Christ. He doesn't lay hands on them. They lay hands on others, and St. Paul would have done that to others as well. So it's quite possible, we know about St. Paul. I don't know whether there are other people who are also chosen in a similar way. Luke's history of the early church is extremely biased towards St. Paul, and of course the scriptures from Acts of the Apostles onwards is also extremely biased towards St. Paul. We barely hear about the other apostles. Some of them just sort of disappear, that's it. I mean, we never hear of Matthias ever again, only in a pious legend and in the tradition. We don't really know what St. Peter did for an awful lot of the time of his ministry. We only know about St. Paul and what St. Luke writes, what St. Paul writes, seem to disagree with each other, which is quite interesting. So, I don't know. We don't know. So we'll see. Right. Gary says he'll go along with that. He carries on writing. Meant as a comment about what Father was saying. Okay. If Gary was being persecuted in Birmingham, as he would be able to hide amongst the other people in that part of the world with great success. Time we saw you again, Gary, I think. I'm missing you. And Bev says, please include Angela in your prayers. She's facing post-operation complications. Yeah. Will do. Okay, so remember, please pray for Father Jonathan, who still needs our prayers, and Father Seraphim, and for Nicholas and Daniel, both of whom are very poorly, for Dino's son Sam, and for Judy, for Erin's Joseph, and Christina's Elizabeth and her mother. Pray for those who have cancer, especially for Popsy, Athanasius, Philip, Martha, and of course King Charles. Carry on praying for Alex, who is the sister of a member of the congregation here, for Benjamin. I hope that Miri is feeling better. These things take a long time to overcome that. And pray for Jennifer and for Angela with her operational complications. God bless and keep her. God bless and keep you also, God willing. Tomorrow, being Thursday, we will find out what happened when they were scattered all over the place, which will be quite interesting. Okay, so any other things there? Bye-bye, Christos. That's my privilege. Okay, if you like this and you think other people might like it, there's the thumbs up thing underneath, so you might like to click on that now. If you want to, you can always share. If you want to receive more of these, you can click on, what is it? You click on, Mary's doing well, thank God. You can click on the thing that says subscribe, and there's a little bell next to it, which should send you a notification it's going to happen again. Okay? So see what you want to do about that. Right-ho. God bless you and keep you. Pray for me, pray for each other. Bye-bye.